This is Chapter 1, Section 1, Identifying Points, Lines, and Planes. So the first thing we're going to start out with is we're going to do a little bit of doodling and just looking at our shapes that we can construct. So some of you might be a lot better than me at doing this, better than others, but it's just a matter of practice so that way we can get used to drawing shapes. So the first shape that I want to go ahead and draw is just a plane. So we'll make a plane here that we have, and we'll just create this type of structure. Now yours is going to be a lot more detailed because of what I'm trying to create this on. So we started with a plane, and then I want to go ahead and I'm going to attach another plane to the side of this. So I'm going to put another plane, so we got almost like a cube shape going on. So let's look at what we have. We need to define some things, so let's look first at a point. So a point here, a point has no dimension and is represented by a dot. So like if I'm going to draw a point, I have here a dot, and then I would label that dot. In this case, we'll label points with capital letters, okay? And then our second thing we have, so if we draw a couple of points up here, so we have point A, and then point B. Our second thing is a line. A line has one dimension, so a line is our second term that we need to remember. One dimension instead of none, and then is represented by a line with arrows extending out. So like if I'm going to draw a line between points A and points B, or a line in points A and points B, then I would have A, B, and then I will have a line above it with arrows. Okay? Make that look a little bit nicer. Yeah, I'll draw my line first and then put in my A, B. That'll probably work better on this. So, looks like that. And we can flip the order. It could be B, A, B. If it's a line, it doesn't matter the order that we have. So to name it, that's another way to name it. So if I go ahead and draw my line in here. So I drew in my line connecting points A and B. And then another way we can label a line is with a lowercase letter. So I might label this line with a lowercase letter like an L. So I can put, here we have these 2 points. And we can say that these equal line L. And then my note on the bottom, through any 2 points there's exactly one line, so any 2 points make a line, and that'll name the line. And so I could put 2 points anywhere on this graph, and I could make a line. So like let's say I put another point in here, like point C. So if I put a point here and I label that C, I could create a line through C and B and call that line CB, which equals the same thing as line BC. So I could do that if I wanted to as well. We do have another term here that I'd like to define, and that's a plane. So a plane is 2 dimensions represented by the shape of a floor or wall extending without end. So like I've drawn 2 planes in here, this first one being the first thing that I drew here. That would be a plane like if it would extend like a tabletop all the way across. And then I also drew another plane in here just to give a reference, this one right here, where that would be like one going vertical and continuing up. So I could keep this extended up, and then I would have a plane as well. So I could take this and just keep extending it up, and I would have the same type of plane. So labeling this plane could be labeled in a couple different ways. The first one is I could label the plane by itself with a symbol like M. This is plane M. So I have this plane M. Or I can label it with 3 points. So 3 points can make a plane. So I could call this plane C, B, A as well. And I would want to write plane in here. So plane M, which equals CBA, or plane CBA or ABC. The last points that I want to define are collinear and coplanar. So we've talked about lines, we've talked about planes, and then we have this prefix here, co. So before each of these we have the prefix co, and that's giving us an idea of what we're actually looking at. And in this case, this co means that it is together or jointly with something. So like collinear means that these points are on the same line. They're together on the same line. So if we were going to give an example of this, we would have to actually go back and add a point. So we might add a point in here and call this point D. And then we could say that points A, D, and B are collinear. And therefore that should give us an idea about coplanar, is just points that are on the same plane. So we could say that point C, A, and B are coplanar because they lie on the same plane. So we're going to go ahead and create another diagram. So we'll start by creating a plane. So we'll start here, create the plane that we want to work on. We're going to make a couple lines and rays on this plane. We haven't really talked about a ray, and we'll get into that in a little bit. But we'll make a line here, and this line will have a couple points on it. So we'll have point S and then point T. And then we'll call this line M. So let's just go ahead and call that. Let's put a couple, let's label our plane. So let's go ahead and call this plane R. And then we'll add another point because I want another point later on for point V. We're going to go ahead and create another line. And this one we're going to have at point P. So we'll create a point here. And then I'm going to have the line going up. And then it's going to go behind this plane. So as it's going down from point P, it's going to go behind, and we'll label this, let's say Q. So another point Q up here. And then whenever we go behind something, we're going to use dashed lines. And then once we come out on the other side, then we'll continue with that solid line going down. Okay? So dashed lines for things behind, and then we continue with the solid line once we exit the back side. Okay? So we have now another line with point P and Q. Alright, for this next part, we're going to go ahead and then I want you guys to go ahead and use the sheet to your right, the blank sheet on your right, and we're going to answer a couple questions. So I'm going to write a question down and then I'll start recording from that point. Okay, so here's a couple questions that I have. First one, give two other names for PQ and plane R. So remember, we're giving other names so we can take our line PQ, and we could change it to QP and put our line symbol on it, and that would work. And then there's not really anything else we could do for that unless I forgot to put something on there, which I did. Apparently this should also be an N, a lowercase n on there, and therefore we can come up with our second name of this. So our second name for this line M or line PQ would be line N. And then plane R, another way to name a plane is to use 3 different points. So we would label this, if we have plane R, we might say this is plane V, P, and T. Okay. The second part, name 3 points that are collinear. So 3 points that are collinear. Remember, 3 points collinear means they have to be on the same line. So in this case, we only have 3 points that are collinear, which is S, P, and T. And then name 4 points that are coplanar, so they're on the same plane. So basically, every point that we have except Q would work for this. So we would have V, S, P, and T for our 4 points that are coplanar. So the last thing I want to do for the guided practice, and I want you to try to do this on your own and then watch the video. So using the diagram 1, which is what we created earlier, and name the 2 other names for these things. So name a point that is not collinear with points Q, S, and T. So we have Q, S, and T as points up here. One that is not collinear to those or sorry, coplanar to those would be something not on that plane, which would be point V over here. So we have point V would be not coplanar with these 2 points. And then the other thing that I have would be looking at the line. It should be line ST. For some reason it got something happened to it. So we have line ST. Name 2 other names for that line that you would have. And basically your option would be to use point P. So 2 other names for this. This would equal line PT, and then that would equal line TP if you wanted as well.